I don't even know how to open this one other than to say Halloween is absolutely immaculate. It has come to my attention as I've been covering these slasher franchises back to back that every single one of them has what I consider to be at least one perfect film. Friday the 13th had Jason Lives, Scream had, well, Scream, and Nightmare on Elm Street had 2, with both the original film and Dream Warriors hitting that S tier spot for me. But you know what? Out of all the films I'm covering this slasher season, this first Halloween film might be the most perfect. And by the way, before anyone coming into the series for the first time with this episode gets all, actually in the comments and points out that something can't be more perfect, I've explained what I mean when I say perfect movies before. Go watch the Jason Lives episode. I said what I said. Halloween is the most perfect of all the perfect films I've covered. John Carpenter's 1978 slasher classic is for me the absolute poster boy of how to make a slasher flick. If this film was a video game, it would be the first Super Mario Bros. By today's standards, you could say it's somewhat basic, but it sets the standard for every single thing that follows. Still totally holds up and just feels like such a groundbreaker in so many ways. Though Halloween is not the first slasher film, as a lot of people mistakenly credit it to be, that title belongs to, depending on how you personally define the genre, either 1960s Peeping Tom by Michael Powell or Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which released only a month later. And even if you don't include them for whatever reason, 1974's Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw Massacre both preceded this movie by 4 years, and Black Christmas was a huge influence on its creation. But nevertheless, Halloween is still a genre-defining piece of work. It is, to put it simply, the best possible film it could have been. It is the ultimate example of making something out of nothing. Filmmakers John Carpenter and Debra Hill had one job: come up with a movie about babysitters being stalked. That was it. No script, no solid outline, and quite frankly, barely even a concept. And they took that tiny little sliver of the suggestion and ran with it, making the single best movie you literally ever could from that building block. The film came about after Irwin Yablans, an independent film producer, saw John Carpenter's action thriller Assault on Precinct 13 and recognised the filmmaker as having some talent. He offered him the assignment, and Carpenter and his then girlfriend Debra Hill got working on a script that was at the time called The Babysitter Murders. Yablans later suggested setting the movie on Halloween night and naming it after the holiday, which was such a good call. As good as this movie might have still been under Carpenter's direction, I doubt it would have been half the success it was without the Halloween title and setting. Title-wise, it's a much easier one to market, especially around the film's original October release date. And setting-wise, it adds so much of a rich atmosphere. Hello, Future Dan here, looking like a maniac because I've just had to, in the middle of taking my makeup off, go down a fucking rabbit hole to try and correct what might be misinformation. Allow me to explain. So 2 things I do actually want to correct on. I said that Irwin Yablans saw John Carpenter's thriller Assault on Precinct 13. I wasn't clear on that he distributed it, and that's how he has a relationship with John Carpenter. I think it was at the time called Siege, but Yablans distributed Assault on Precinct 13. And actually, apparently, the film was always going to be set at Halloween. I did just say that Yablans later suggested setting the movie on Halloween night and naming it after the holiday, and then I go on to say why that was a good call. Point is, I am led to believe, as far as I can find, that the plan was always to set it on Halloween. The thing that makes no fucking sense though, and has left me in this fucking 4-hour spiral of research. Ignore the bus sound in the background. This is all very amateur shot and kind of off the cuff. I apologise for the production and the state of my face right now, but I went full fucking Pepe Sylvia on this thing. That is not a conspiracy board. That is about this, but whatever. Anyway, apparently, there may never have been a draft called The Babysitter Murders. So, the reason this all came about and the reason I'm in like half makeup right now is I've kind of had to go on this tangent because as I was taking my makeup off after we're just sort of finished for the day, Jamie's on camera right now, say hello Jamie. There we go. We just sort of finished filming for the day, and we're transferring files over, and Netflix have just put out a documentary in their Movies That Made Us series on Halloween. Since we've just done Halloween stuff, I thought put that on in the background. That'll be a fun thing to unwind to. And I start taking off my makeup when I hear fucking producer Erwin Yablans, they're talking in the documentary about how the first draft was called The Babysitter Murders, and Yablans goes, "No it wasn't, that's bullshit." Fucking what, sir? What? Have you waited to reveal this information until I have wrote this script just to spite me? Because it certainly feels like it, because finding out the truth of this was no fucking easy task. What the hell? Everybody knows there was a draft called The Babysitter Murders. That's always been a thing, right? There's even a film literally called The Babysitter Murders in tribute to that fact. But he says it's bullshit. If you've read it on the internet, it's dog shit. It's garbage. Like, never happened. It was always meant to be called Halloween. And I'm like, well, he's the producer, so he would know. So I'm like, well, where's this Babysitter Murders rumor come from? So I do some Googling and I find out one of the references was in a book that I remembered I read at uni. So I tracked down the book, and sure enough, that book, it says The Babysitter Murders. Like, it mentions in an interview, John Carpenter said that the film was first called The Babysitter Murders. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I search for this interview. And I find this takes us down to this page where the keyword suggests that The Babysitter Murders is in the page on Google. You know how you get the little keywords that sort of preview the page? It says The Babysitter Murders in that keywords thing, but it takes us to the site, and the site is this study guide, and it's got a paywall on it. And it's a paywall that will gain you access to, among other things, this Sight and Sound article. So I think, well, I'm not a mug. I know that Sight and Sound have film archives. So I go to the Sight and Sound film archives, and I find this interview that is supposedly behind this paywall. Control F in it. No mention of The Babysitter Murders. So I'm like, so what the hell? Where's this quote come from? I then find the same quote, or a different quote where John Carpenter references The Babysitter Murders on BBC with no references to where they got it. And then I'm like, well, what the hell? Okay, maybe John Carpenter's a bust. Maybe I'll go down the Debra Hill route. And I did manage to find Debra Hill. She has also said, in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Debra Hill said that the film was originally called The Babysitter Murders. Okay, cool. So that sells it, right? And then I think, hold the fuck up, you're forgetting something. And a memory just comes back to me. I remember vividly, I watched a Halloween documentary in preparation of making these videos, and it just completely skimmed over me. John Carpenter says this.
Erwin said, let's make a horror film about babysitters who are stalked by this psychotic killer. He suggested we put it on Halloween night, play the whole thing on Halloween night, and call the movie Halloween.
What the fuck, John? What's the truth? I have no idea if there was ever a draft called The Babysitters, the Babysitter Murders. And if there wasn't a draft called The Babysitter Murders, I have no idea where this rumor came from. I cannot find the source of its origin. I am sorry if I spread misinformation, but hopefully this clears up some of the shit surrounding it, and I am so tired. I'm going to go take off makeup now. Enjoy the rest of the video. Financier Mustafa Akkad was brought in to put up the film's low $300,000 budget, which Yablans said he basically had to trick him into giving up by using his own ego against him, telling him that $300,000 would probably be way too much for him to invest, knowing his pride couldn't take it. The final screenplay took around 10 days to write, and besides the key concept of babysitter stalking in the Halloween setting, Yablans and Akkad basically left all creative control to Carpenter and Hill, with Yablans making some suggestions but happy to take Carpenter and Hill's lead on the final decisions. The two bashed out the final script in less than a month, with the core concept being developed from killer stalks babysitters to something that was more like a study of evil in general. In the book, writing the horror movie, Debra Hill is quoted as saying, "The idea was that you couldn't kill evil, and that was how we came about the story. We went back to the old idea of Samhain, that Halloween was the night where all the souls are let out to wreak havoc upon the living, and then came up with the story about the most evil kid who ever lived. And when John came up with this fable of a town with a dark secret of someone who once lived there and now that evil had come back, that's what made Halloween work. And my God, did it work indeed. We open on a house on Halloween night, though specifically a house through the eyes of an unseen observer. The film immediately placing us in the voyeuristic viewpoint of our soon-to-be killer. Through this perspective, we glance through the windows at a young girl and her boyfriend. The two go upstairs and we walk inside. We go to the kitchen. We grab a knife. As the boyfriend leaves, we skulk upstairs. We find a clown mask and put it on, our vision becoming filtered through its small eye slots. The music is building. The girl sings to herself in the other room. We see clothes strewn around the floor. We take ourselves and our knife into the girl's room. She is undressed and recognizes us. She yells at us, wanting us to leave. The music crescendos as we suddenly stab her. We, the audience, complicit in this horrendous act. We walk outside as a car pulls up and a man and a woman get out. The man calls out our name, confused. He reaches down to our mask and pulls it off. And for the first time, we cut to an audience perspective on the action. We were a child, a little boy named Michael, who has just inexplicably murdered his sister. He stands there and stares, still holding the knife. He seems neither pleased or distraught by his actions. He feels nothing. We feel everything. Holy shit! What an opener! You know, I'm really glad I covered this series after Friday the 13th, because it meant I got to watch Friday the 13th first and come back to Halloween after, and my god, the difference in these movies and how they use their techniques is night and day. It's no secret that Friday the 13th was an intentional rip-off of Halloween strapped to a different setting. But watching them so close together like this, it is staggering to see what a difference the way you tell a story can make on the final piece. There's plenty of POV shots in Friday, but none of them feel like this opening. With Friday, it's often a quick flash just to show the killer is watching. With Halloween, you get this slowly creeping build. We watch through the window, we pick up the knife, we put on the mask, there's a patience to it. The shot goes on for a whopping and undisturbed 3.5 minutes before our reveal, which sets the film up on a chilling punch. Speaking of, I know this kid is only in the film for like 20 seconds, but what a performance! I love the way he barely seems to react to the mask being pulled off his face. His body seemingly subconsciously acknowledging it as he closes his eyes when the material scrapes past them, but his mind seemingly doesn't register it at all as he immediately drops back into this resting, blank stare, still raising the knife with the other arm. This kid has stared into the abyss, and the abyss has stared back. Incredible opening. Not missing a beat, we then cut to the film's opening titles, and even these are a masterpiece. Carpenter's iconic main title theme plays as we slowly track into the left eye of a smiling pumpkin. It sells the setting, it sells the atmosphere, it sells the themes, with the eye zoom homaging the film's use of perspectives, once again putting us in the eye of the creepy thing on screen. It's a perfect title sequence, with a perfect score that is, for my money, the greatest piece of music of any of the franchises I've covered this season by a long shot, and possibly the greatest horror theme ever. Carpenter's score is so important to this flick, its impact cannot be understated. There was a time during development that Carpenter screened a final cut minus sound effects and music to a young executive from Fox, and she was thoroughly unimpressed and not at all scared. He later showed it to her again with the music added in, and she loved it. Never underestimate the importance of the relationship between horror and sound. Sound is always important to film, but that's never more true than with the horror genre. If you want to experiment and see how true this is, go and dig out any film that scares you. Go to its most terrifying sequence and watch it on mute or with a different score. I guarantee you it will not come anywhere near as close to affecting you. Can you believe that Carpenter was only paid $10,000 for his duties on this movie? That's $10,000 total to cover writing, directing and score. The title theme alone is worth 10 times that much. It's incredible. In a way, actually, those opening titles are the perfect little microcosm of what makes Halloween great. For all the praise I've thrown on them, it's essentially a slow track into a pumpkin against a black backdrop. But that's just it, isn't it? It's so beautifully simple. There's no wasted decisions, no unnecessary flair. It's horror with all the fat trimmed. It has the smallest budget out of any film I'll cover this month, but it never feels like it needs anything more, because it always takes the purest route to its scares with no frills attached. Not because it can't afford the thrills, but because it simply does not need them. It's never boring, it never lets up, there's never a wasted minute. Every penny is put exactly where it needs to go, and while it's almost, dare I even say, basic in its end result, it is masterful in its basics. It's so simple in its approach that to describe the plot alone isn't remotely doing the film justice. I can honestly sum it up in a paragraph. 15 years after he murdered his sister at age 6, Michael Myers escapes from Smith's Grove Sanitarium where he was incarcerated when his psychiatrist Dr. Loomis arrives to escort him to a court hearing. Michael then returns to Haddonfield, the site of his original murders, with Loomis in pursuit, who attempts to track him down with the help of a local police sheriff, fearing the terror he is capable of. Michael dons a mask and begins to stalk random teens before murdering them in an emotionally detached killing spree, and one of the teens, Laurie Strode, becomes the sole survivor, managing to stave Michael off after all of her friends are killed, long enough to stay alive in time for Dr. Loomis to show up and shoot Michael, saving her and presumably killing the masked murderer in the process, only for Michael to disappear into the night with his wounds, leaving behind nothing but the carnage he wrought this Halloween night, on this small little bubble of white picket fenced middle class America. That's it. That's it. That's the whole film. It does no more, it does no less. You'd be forgiven for thinking from the simple synopsis of murderer escapes, kills some teens, then flees, that this could be any other generic slasher, filling the bargain bins of a VHS store before fading into obscurity forever. But no, this is so much more. Halloween is not a movie you celebrate for its plot, you celebrate Halloween for its execution. In this film, Carpenter and Hill don't need horrifying special effects, skin-crawling stylized murders, or even blood to get under your skin. This film is shockingly light on gore. What it has instead is a creeping sense of dread. To compare it to Friday the 13th again, in that film, a killer would watch from a distance before jumping out with some gory flash. In Halloween, the killer doesn't jump out, he lingers. The film uses its foregrounds and backgrounds to spectacular effect. It feels like the presence of Michael is always in frame, whether we're watching him through his eyes, seeing him skulk from a distance, or just stand clear as day in the middle of the frame. There's always the feeling that he could strike at any time. It's suspense over surprise. The jump scares are rare in this movie, and their sparsity only makes them more effective when they do crop up. The vast majority of the time in the movie, you see Michael coming. He doesn't jump out at you so much as hang in your gaze until you're deeply uncomfortable and walk slowly in your direction. One of my favourite examples of this occurs late in the movie. Laurie thinks she has killed Michael and pauses in the foreground to collect herself, and there, in the background, just out of focus, Michael sits up. This isn't met with some sudden jolt of music. He doesn't suddenly leap at the camera as a violin string screeches out of tune in your ear. The music starts slow, deliberate, building. He hangs there, out of focus, looking at Laurie, who still doesn't notice him. We watch him stand and walk wordlessly towards her, hoping the whole time that Laurie will hear him, praying that she'll turn and run. This is Halloween's mastery. This is what it excels at. It's constantly playing this game of cat and mouse with its audience. It winds them up tight. It's patient where its audience is not. You almost start rooting for the violence to happen, not because you want to see it, but just to get it over with. You just need something, anything to relieve a little bit of this tension, but the film delays it time and time again, withholding the big scares because it knows that subtlety is where it can really get you. That when our brains worry about what's going to happen, it's always the worry that is harder to deal with than the thing we are worried about. The scariest moment in any horror film is not when the killer gets his victim, it's the bit just beforehand when they're about to. That moment where it's almost there. They're just outside the closet. They can hear us breathing. What's going to happen next? Oh my god, he's noticed me. Oh god, he's walking over. Oh god, he knows I'm in here. To make a crude, but I think honestly pretty apt analysis, if say the frights of films like Friday the 13th were the equivalent to sex, then Halloween is sex with a huge focus on foreplay. The film is obsessed with the tease. After the opening murder that sets the scene in the film's opening, we don't see another kill play out in front of us until a whopping 54 minutes into the movie. That's nearly a whole hour into the hour and a half runtime. But it doesn't feel slow or dragged out because it's always playing with that suspenseful feeling of being stalked. We're constantly shifting either from Michael's twisted perspective, his haunting heavy breathing punctuating his voyeuristic gaze, to seeing him in the distance or lurking up close, maybe obscured behind a sheet on a washing line or driving in the background in a car. Always there in a way the characters, and sometimes even you as the audience, can never be sure if you've seen him or not. And when he isn't there, you still feel his presence. His impact on this world is still always front and centre of the film's focus, as Donald Pleasance's performance as Dr. Loomis is incredible. His monologues describing the evil he saw in Michael, the panic in his voice when he speaks of the destruction the man is capable of, his desperate efforts to track him down. Loomis speaks and acts like a man who saw the devil, and you believe he did. This is another under-celebrated aspect of this slasher flick. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Texas Chainsaw, Child's Play. The killer almost always has to be discovered in slashers. The characters start off blissfully unaware of the evil forces surrounding them and have to discover what they're capable of as the film goes on. They don't know to be scared from the moment the film starts, but Loomis does. Loomis is terrified, and he gives us every warning that we should be too. Speaking of performances, it probably also goes without saying that the exceptionally talented Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays our final girl and protagonist Laurie Strode, is great in this too. She gives the film a real human anchor to hang on to. She feels like a real teenager. She chats with her friends, she goes to school, she goofs around with kids, she babysits. She just seems like a nice, normal person whose life is suddenly turned upside down when this horrendous monster just comes crashing into it without warning. She's very easy to root for, and her terrified performance really sells just how harrowing her encounter with Michael Myers really is. And Myers himself is one of the most incredible on-screen villains there is in this film. Nick Castle was paid only $25 a day for his performance. And you might argue that he almost doesn't have to act in this thing. It's very robotic in that it's a lot of just standing, walking, and occasionally killing, and not much else. But that's the whole point. Carpenter never gave Castle any direction. It was just stand here, walk there, do this. Pure clinical instructions and nothing else. But pair those movements with the score and the sound effect of Michael's heavy breathing, and it is effective as hell. Here's a character with this cold, emotionless detachment from all of his brutal acts, and it only makes him more frightening. There's no motive, there's no feelings, there's nothing. These random acts of violence are entirely senseless. We have no clue what makes this character tick. We can hypothesize, sure. Many people analysing the film have suggested a kind of psychosexual element to the killing, spurred on by the fact that Michael seems to murder his undressed sister, arguably somewhat in a vengeful manner for the action of having sex with her boyfriend. But really, it's all speculation because in terms of any actual emotions attached to his acts, there's nothing there. That's what makes him so horrifying. It also makes Carpenter's one single direction for the character that much more compelling. In a rare moment of something registering beneath the mask, Michael stabs the character Bob and pins him to the wall and uncharacteristically takes a moment to register what he sees before him. Apparently Carpenter's given direction to actor Nick Castle here was that he should look at Bob's corpse like it was an interesting butterfly collection. And this is where this pause and considered head tilt comes in. Genius move by Carpenter that's executed brilliantly in its simplicity by Castle there. They give us something so little, but we see it and we immediately want more of it. Some hope that we might understand what makes this character tick. But this crumb of insight is all we get, and it's in its reserved nature and unwillingness to explain itself that the character only becomes even more compelling. To put it simply, Halloween is pure craft. It is astonishing that a film about a dude in a mask murdering babysitters can be this good. But any story is only as good as the way you tell it, and Carpenter and Hill are clearly master storytellers. They created the ultimate incomprehensible evil in Michael Myers, painted a beautifully realised suburban Halloween backdrop for him to exist in, and just let him loose. This might be my absolute favourite slasher film. Hell, it might be one of my favourite films of all time, which as anyone who watches this channel regularly will know is testament to its quality because I normally go for the happier end of the horror spectrum. But Halloween closes out with Michael's heavy breathing cut over wide shots of all the peaceful places he's disturbed with his violence. Hardly cheery stuff. And yet, I just can't fault it. It's just such a perfect execution of what it sets out to do that I become completely immersed in its story and characters. Great movie. Don't just watch it, study it. This is a masterclass in suspense and characterization, in setting and budget, in pace and execution. Every single thing about this film works, and it still holds up despite being the oldest movie I'll cover all month. It's scary, suspenseful, and brilliantly subtle in its approach to horror. Its only problem? There were several more of them after this. And when you smash it this hard right out of the gate, it can only go downhill from here. And my god, does this series drop off quick, drop off weird, and drop off hard. So please, join me again tomorrow as we take the first step down this rocky, turbulent path of dipping quality and mixed results in one of the least consistent franchises of all time, with 1981's Halloween 2. Make sure you don't miss that by subscribing to my OnlyDans at the red button below and hitting that notification bell. Also, let me know your thoughts with a like and a comment for that sweet algorithm boost. And if you're really enjoying the show, you can support the channel by becoming a patron and get access to some exclusive perks for your troubles. More info at the link in the descriptions. Other than that, I've been Dan Drambles, you're watching Wholesome Halloween 2 / a season, and I will see you again tomorrow.